Hello. Ah, okay, we're live. Sorry, my first time. Hi, welcome to MedCity News' weekly MedHeads chat. Today we are going to be tackling trends in healthcare marketing and social media. MedHeads is MedCity News' weekly kind of look at the business of healthcare innovation, and with ShushMed happening this week and some LinkedIn announcements, we thought the timing was great to kind of tackle these. I am joined by our regular oh, I probably should introduce myself. Sorry, first time. Rookie mistake, honeymoon phase. My name is Kate Idem, and I am Director of Marketing Solutions for Breaking Media, MedCity News' parent company. And probably 80% of what I do right now is in the healthcare space. So. And this was my first ShushMed, so luckily we're going to be joined by a number of veterans today. So Chris Supper, who, as we all know, is the kind of founder of MedCity, is the founder of MedCity News, and is Breaking Media's VP of Healthcare.
Hello.
We had Amanda Burry of Sim Partners, and she's Director of Sales for the healthcare space. And I believe she told me this was her 5th or 6th ShushMed, so she is our first veteran. And we are also joined by Ben Dillon, Ben Wave, Chief Strategy Officer at Geometric, and who is also a board member, I believe, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So we are excited to have the group together. If you have questions, please tweet us and use the hashtag MedHeads. That is MedHead with an S, plural. And we will be taking those. We can certainly feed those questions in as well. So I think we're just going to we'll kind of go round robin and kind of start with the biggest trends that you saw, either covered at ShushMed or other areas of folks, since we're all kind of in the marketing and healthcare space 24/7, living and breathing it. So either trends that you saw coming out of the conference or ones that you didn't see tackled but you'd like us to chat about today. So I'm going to kick it to Amanda first.
Hello, thanks for having me. I think some of the biggest trends that I saw, and one of my favorites, is the retail enablement of the patient becoming more like a consumer. So typically there was always a clear path for patients, whether it be through referrals. It was very B2B-like. I think now it's become very exciting for healthcare marketers to really have a little bit more agility and especially transparency around the type of marketing they're doing. So I really liked the retail enablement approach that healthcare is starting to take.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, Ben, you want to give us your give us 10 cents, not just 2 cents.
Sure. Certainly retailization was a big one. I think the move into Agile has been a very big one. One of the keynotes was Eric Ries, the author of the Lean Startup, and a real icon within that community. Healthcare has been a conservative space for a long time, and we've seen this need for them to act a lot more like a new business that's finding its way in the world. Incredible time of change, obviously, within healthcare, and now we're just starting to see that really affect those of us who are on the ground. We've talked about it a lot at a macro level, how our health system is going to change, but now we need to operationalize that, and that means new ways of working across the board, and the interest in trying new things, experimenting. Don't go off and spend months and tens of thousands of dollars researching something. Just put things into the space, see what kind of a reaction you get. Those things played very heavily at the conference.
Okay. I think on when we were prepping a little bit for this, you'd also mentioned kind of population health. That's a topic that we've been hearing a lot about. How did you see that kind of play out at the conference?
Yeah, I mean, population health continues to be a bit buzzwordy. It's a thing that everyone's attaching to the things they're doing because it is so much what we see as the future of this stuff. But really, population health as a topic, given that the audience at the conference is largely marketers, PR people, planners, strategists, in any other industry, what we talk about as population health would ultimately be a marketing problem, right? We need to communicate with large groups of people on a very individualized basis. The frequency of those communications is often very high, particularly for our most at-risk people, and we need to change behavior. And in any other space, that's a marketing problem. Marketers have a great suite of solutions for that. In healthcare, I think a lot of folks started out thinking about population health as a clinical issue because it's doctors and patients. But I think now, as we try to operationalize some of these concepts, as we try to go beyond one-on-one conversations, it's really clear that marketers have a great tool set in order to actually take that stuff to market and make it really happen, make it really work out there.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to probably dig into a few of those those topics a little bit more. Just kind of kick it over to Chris for a second. I know Chris wasn't at ShushMed, but he was at the Louisville Innovation Conference this week, though I did learn this week that there's like 5 different ways to pronounce Louisville, and they just own it at their visitor center. It literally is a sign that says, that would have been a good visual aid. It's like lit up in the window, and it's like 5 different ways that you can do it. So, but obviously, Chris, having been kind of in the healthcare space a lot. So, Chris, give us your kind of top trends and things that you think we should kind of dig into a little bit today.
Sure, and I wasn't at ShushMed, but there were some big things that happened this week in the area of LinkedIn, which for people who've been working in the medical device sector or specific research areas or even in digital health, had become a really focal point and central area to gather memberships and peers and like thinkers, and even have, because of those relationships, form conferences. But a big macro event happened this week on LinkedIn. LinkedIn changed a lot of the policies of its groups, and it largely meant to eliminate all that spam that we get into our inboxes, right, when we join these groups about, meet a salesperson and so on. But as a result, the people who are very active in LinkedIn groups, and there was an organization, the Medical Devices Group, which has, I think, 350,000 plus members, and other groups, suddenly saw the tools that they were using, private messaging, moderating comments, all those things stripped away. And this has kind of been a gradual thing with LinkedIn, that they have been changing their relationships with their with groups and other tools that have actually undermined some of their most active members. And so you're seeing in healthcare some of the people who are on the industry side using LinkedIn as their main communication tool with a broad array of members starting to depart LinkedIn. And I think that's an important, how LinkedIn is used in healthcare and how people are going to branch out and use other communications tools are really important.
I agree. As someone who, I think especially in the professional space, really does utilize LinkedIn a lot and looks for that in terms of seeing new trends that are coming and really starting conversations, and especially some of the groups and the way that's changed, that will definitely be important. And I think for me, this being my very inaugural kind of ShushMed, it was really, it was a great opportunity to kind of network. The weather was gorgeous. Which was, helpful, for a nice walk outside the hotel. From, every now and then it's always good to get out a little bit. But I think the session that I enjoyed the most was, it was given by Lift 1428, and they talked about design thinking. And I think we as marketers, oftentimes we are kind of in our marketing silo, and not really understanding, kind of some of the business objectives of the organization and making sure that everything we're doing is laddering back up. And I think that design thinking session was a good reminder of the impact that marketers and their involvement in kind of the full process, even in terms of how a healthcare system can offer a product, really look at a service area. So they gave a case study on BB Health, I believe, which is in Delaware, and they took a look at their women's health, and so the way they were defining women's health, or even their women's health pavilion, really was just the OBGYN offering. It really wasn't the full suite of kind of services and healthcare services that a woman would need, through late preteen up through kind of full end-of-life care. So it really was an opportunity for them to really, they went and kind of shadowed, really followed some women kind of through their day-to-day life. And obviously, healthcare is something that people only need at, when something goes wrong, or, during your annual checkup or something like that. And so how could they, more fully integrate or be a resource for women in the community, especially when they're in a lot of rural areas as well. So it was a really interesting take versus just, some of the other sessions, which were still equally good, talking about, they're doing marketing automation and some of the, click-throughs and how they can measure patient visits back to, Facebook ads, which I think as a marketer on a day-to-day basis was great, but it was really interesting to hear kind of that broader range as well. So the one I would like to, kind of dig into is, I think, kind of that retail enablement. And Amanda, I think you're the one that kind of brought this up as kind of one of the trends. And if you can maybe just dig into that, a little more in terms of either what you heard at the conference or, with some examples of the client, customers that your group is working with.
Sure, great, thanks. So I think when you think about the retail-enabled approach, like I said, there's a much different take on healthcare now. So patients are actually out there shopping. The competitive landscape has become much tougher for hospitals and healthcare systems. So whereas prior they just based on referrals or recommendations, now they're really working tough, especially in a market like Chicago where we're based, they're fighting against each other to get those primary care patients and also those specialty clinic patients. So we're seeing a lot of players in the market do some out-of-the-box thinking with a lot of local SEO tactics, a lot of social media tactics. Some of the healthcare systems in Chicago do a great job at social media. So they really tie it back to storytelling, and that was another one of the really key takeaways from SHSMD was storytelling, how to tell an authentic local story. So all social media outlets aren't perfect for all healthcare systems. So I think that finding the ones that work for you, whether it be Facebook, we know Facebook is the highest used. We know that hospitals out of all social media all of them mostly have Facebook pages. So I think going back to that retail approach of how do you connect the patient at the start of their journey when they're doing a search as easily on Google. So we know that 1 in 20 health search queries on Google are related to healthcare. So how do you start there at that patient journey from the time that they search for you to the time they interact with localized content and those reviews that are on the pages? Another key takeaway, when you shop on Amazon, you read the reviews. When you go to TripAdvisor to book a hotel, you read people's reviews. Patients now want the same transparency within healthcare, so we're starting to see healthcare systems put those cute little star ratings on pages, and those star ratings are now helping that patient through their journey in order to make a decision. And then how do they interact, or how do they become a lifetime value patient for that system? So how do they interact with their social media? Are they following any of their blogs? We know that women are typically CEO healthcare decision makers, so how are they targeting certain segments within Facebook and promoted post? So I think this entire, what in retail is called omni-channel, how is healthcare now looking at that entire omni-channel approach from a patient standpoint? And I really love all of that. I think that is very exciting and interesting. And we start to see a lot of our current customers kind of break out of that mold and start to dabble in those areas. So working with beacons and mobile wallets. So how are you pushing proximity targeting and messaging to those customers, whether they're driving by the hospital or whether they're maybe walking by one of your primary care clinics as a flu shot reminder. I think all of those different elements kind of help loop back that consumer or that customer into the healthcare system for a lifetime patient value.
Great. And Ben, if you want to add on to that, or I'd also be interested, you kind of brought up the issue of agility and the different agile concepts that were kind of discussed at the conference. So we'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the topic of storytelling, I think, again, as healthcare is going through these significant shifts, the way systems tell their stories are very different than they used to be. Traditionally, healthcare has been very facility-centric, very building-centric. So you'd go to East Campus or West Campus or this hospital or that hospital. We're seeing a couple of shifts in that. One is because of the growth of systems, because of the merger and acquisition activity, that systems are presenting themselves as systems. They're trying to tell a bigger story around that. The other big shift is just this move to physician employment, and as a result of that, we're seeing a lot more focus on promotion of individual physicians and their personalities out there, rather than sort of generic faceless service lines, because frankly, there's a need to fill schedules, and I mean, there's some very pragmatic needs behind that. But the result of that is that we're seeing this big shift in terms of having to make the story very different than it was in the past. And I think the stars and ratings are a great example of that. There's lots and lots of sites out there that have stars and ratings, whether it's Healthgrades or Yelp or Google. But today, the rating of physicians is still a relatively rare task in most of those traditional rating venues. And so you tend to have a fairly misrepresentative picture of that. So the move to do this from within the organization, certainly there's a transparency element of it. From the promotional side of the calculus, though, they're really trying to make sure that they are presenting those doctors appropriately given the full range of feedback that they get from actual patients of that doctor. Not to say that people on Google aren't actual patients, but it's not necessarily representative sample when you have 2 or 3 ratings out there. So they tend to take things like their CGCAP scores or the more comprehensive satisfaction surveys that they're doing through one of the providers that does that, taking that data and putting it out there. So it's not typically being executed today as this sort of opportunity to go and right there put your rating on your hospital's website for a particular doctor, for instance, but instead it's a more controlled, statistically significant approach to this. And of course, we all know that Google picks this stuff up, and consumers love it as they're starting their searches from the search engines.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, and I wonder how well that. I mean, what is the uptake? I mean, how many patients participate in that? I remember, gosh, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago, Practice Fusion, as it tried to mine its data, tried to create its own review site because it had small practices, and it would try to access and survey the patients that were with their doctors and then lead that back to either its own EMR or create its own site. They liked it because it was authentic, and they also thought they would do something that a hospital wouldn't, which is maybe weed out the good or the bad or the ones that people thought were unfair, right? Doctors have big egos, right, and they're very sensitive to feedback. And so, there seem to always have been attempts to capture authentic patient feedback, but either the patients aren't very compliant with it, or the systems themselves kind of have a certain level of resistance to giving all feedback up front. I was just interested in trending how successful that's really been.
And I will say that right now there's maybe 15 or 20 systems that actually have this live. There's a large number of systems that are in the process of putting this out there. So this was first done by University of Utah 2 or maybe close to 3 years ago now, really as part of a broader transparency initiative. They happened to be putting it out about the same time that Google was starting, if you put the right markup in your pages, to pick this stuff up and pull it into search results as well. For them, a typical doctor might have 100 to 200 ratings and quite a few comments. They're putting everything out there, and that's really the marquee advice at this point. Really is you put everything out there unless it's defamatory or has profanity or PHI, protected health information. So. In the absence of those couple of carve-outs, you have to put everything out there. You have to put it out there for all the docs. Otherwise, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go down the path. If you're not putting it all out there, and it usually is pretty clear to folks if there are no negative comments, for instance, it's just not credible anymore. I think we've all gotten a little bit sensitized to the fact that not all rating sites are giving all ratings equal weight, and there's a little bit of gaming that sometimes happens out there. You have to make sure that you're keeping it clean, you're putting everything out there. And to be perfectly honest, as we talk to clients about these issues, it is the handful of negative comments that make all of the positive comments credible. Press Ganey, for instance, probably the largest single player within the survey side of the market, has their own mark of quality and their own set of rules where they really make sure, or attempt to make sure, that anyone using the data in this way is really doing it from a transparency perspective and is putting all the data out there.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that, when you think about the reviews, you got to put the good out with the bad, like Ben said. But a lot of the systems that we work with, they use, business rules around physician profiles can only contain reviews if they have 30 or more, so that there's a good sample set. When you talk about schema.org markup, to make sure that the stars are aligning within Google search results, very critical and important, and helps from a search ranking perspective. We see our clients wanting to do it because of those reasons, but also because they want to become better. So we work with clients that have 30, 40, 50,000 reviews for all their physicians, and it's all about what kind of process do you do to kind of filter out those reviews, the ones that might break PHI or might have some, bad language in there you want to take out. But the Press Ganey reviews that Ben mentioned are much more patient-centric, and they can be verified as actual patients. When people talk about Google reviews or Yelp or health grades, it's very hard to verify that that person was actually a patient. And a lot of the times you'll read those reviews and they will actually be on behalf of a family member or friend. So those reviews might be a 1-star, but it's not the patient leaving the review. So it makes, from a transparency perspective, very hard to verify back at the hospital level. So we've worked with many clients that are utilizing the Press Ganey reviews and some other vendors into their pages, and has definitely seen a huge uptick and an increase from a transparency and from a search result standpoint.
And docs love Press Ganey. I mean, they just can't say enough good things about Press Ganey. Well, but I wonder. I mean, our reviews, when you think about the digital marketing that came out of ShushMed, and even the things I was hearing from other people this week, I mean, is that the place where it's really the next phase for health systems? Is that the next phase for them with digital marketing? I mean, I think that this issue of population health is a great one because I mean, they're one of the things that I went to this innovation summit where there were a lot of startups, and one of the things that the tech side is always trying to solve through mobile apps is medication adherence, right? One of the big challenges in healthcare, and they noted that most app use in healthcare really engagements at like a 5% level. It would seem that marketing is the great solution for medication adherence or other population health tools. So is transparency the next step right now for what's happening with digital marketing, or are there other things that seem to be getting traction that address some of the big clinical issues?
Well, keep in mind that we're still in that 1 foot in the boat, 1 foot on the dock thing that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. While every system is trying to prepare itself for a world in which they are compensated based on outcomes, and there's a different level of accountability for things. The reality is that for most of them, the vast majority of their payment structure is still around getting people in and getting them services. And so, from that perspective, it really is about making sure that people can access the healthcare they need. And today, a lot of that really is around connecting people to the right physician. Ultimately, you're very rarely making an appointment with, again, a nameless, faceless service somewhere. And so we've not done a great job as an industry in putting information out there that allows patients to make good decisions. And I'll say we've done a fair amount of research on this lately and put together an ebook that you can get from our website, geonetric.com, looking a little more holistically at promotion of physicians online. We've got great ways to get people to that information, but ultimately, if your doctor is nothing more than a medical degree and a residency, it doesn't give patients a whole lot to base their decisions between one provider and another provider. And so as we look at this, it's important that we make our doctors real people in terms of the way that we present them online. A lot of that storytelling, getting them out there talking about why they became a doctor or philosophy of their practice, highlighting their expertise, putting information out there that allows them to talk about some of the big issues that they hear in a place where consumers and patients can listen to that and get a better feel for their style in a one-on-one communication that they may have in the future. And then ultimately, the ratings and reviews sort of round that out by providing a third-party perspective on that doctor, the experience they have with them, and how they're going to deal with it. So when we put all those things together, I think we're really giving patients a much better set of tools to find a doctor that they're ultimately happy with and can have a long-term relationship with.
Amanda, coming out of ShushMed and kind of living in the kind of digital marketing space, whether you heard it talked about at the conference or not, what is kind of the what's the next thing in terms of digital marketing and social media in healthcare?
Yeah. I think it's really, marketers have bits and pieces done, so they have different elements. We always like to talk about you have to crawl before you walk, before you run. So this whole idea of crawl, walk, run. And I think marketers, healthcare marketers, have different buckets of those kind of locked down and under control. I think they need to go back to kind of building more of a holistic foundation. So a lot of what I missed at the conference was talking about harnessing their location data. So as Ben talks about all of these elements around physicians and locations, taking that location data and making it actionable across all of the multiple properties that exist out there, whether it be Apple Maps, Google, Yahoo, Bing, Foursquare. If somebody's trying to find an ER or an urgent care or a family practice doctor for directions or a phone call, 9 times out of 10, the results that are being returned to the patient are inaccurate. So building that foundation and taking that location data and making it actionable and scalable across the local ecosystem like Google, Apple, Yahoo, Bing, I think is really one of the core elements that marketers are starting to focus on. We talk to hundreds of healthcare systems a year, and this is probably one of their #1 pain points and initiatives for 2016. And the way that this data has to be structured is so critical in healthcare. So I think starting there, and then they can easily just start to filter and kind of pile on all of those other great things they've been doing with social. So now we're making sure that when somebody's checking in on Twitter, it's the right address and the right location. So I think connecting it back to social, local is social. So connecting those two pieces together and kind of layering in all the other tactics that they've had is now going to start to become full circle, more that omni-channel approach as paired with localized content and storytelling. I think really starting with that location data is going to be a 2016 large initiative.
All right, how about you, Chris?
So I agree, and I'll take it off the Shushmet beat because you three were there and I didn't get a chance to, but I do think that some of the bigger social media channels are going to continue to change their relationship with their customers and their members. I'm going to go back to LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, particularly on the industry side, when I talk about medical device or pharma, and the people who are working in it, had always been a great gathering place. It wasn't just a place to put out your resume and to maybe find the right headhunter for you, but some place to really connect with people you wouldn't otherwise connect with. That's a relationship that's changing, and you could hear stories of people. Like I said, the medical devices group on LinkedIn was so well connected that the organizer started his own conference so these people could meet in real time. Other people have leveraged LinkedIn through these groups to build attendance at existing events. But the way that LinkedIn is changing this, I think they're cutting off those opportunities. And I think that's going to extend. I think that's going to extend to Twitter, and I think that's going to extend to Facebook as they continue to change policies or add new features. So I think that when we look at the baseline of healthcare social media, there's going to be this changing relationship in which the organizations that want to leverage it to connect with consumers or to connect with their peers, they're either going to find it's going to take a lot more work or even a little bit more money.
I was going to say it's always that risk of marketers that we rely on a lot of channels that we don't own, or that our clients don't own. When we really rely on those, to be a driver of business and conversation and engagement. And so obviously we are at the mercy certainly of the tech companies, running those platforms, and they obviously need to, they're not necessarily playing to the common denominator, but they have a wide audience, a lot of stakeholders to work with. So, well, we are at about 3 minutes out, and so I know I was supposed to ask this, I think 7 minutes out, so I'm a little behind the game. Of kind of what is your kind of your top story, for the week. So why don't we start with Ben?
Sure. Well, and it's not necessarily a specific story of the week, but I live in Iowa, and so it's already heavy political season here. The candidates are swarming. You can't pick up your own telephone anymore. But it's been interesting from a healthcare lens to watch how the discussion has moved from 2 years ago or 4 years ago around where the various parties feel like they need to go from a healthcare perspective. And particularly, there's been a couple of proposals coming from the Republican side that have started to shift that line. Instead of just the repeal rhetoric that we've been hearing for a long time, we're starting to see a repeal but replace with honestly not really huge shifts in a lot of ways. There's not necessarily a mandate for everyone, but they're talking about still getting large numbers of people some kind of coverage. They're still trying to, I think, protect the fact that now that millions of people have insurance who have never had insurance before, who have not necessarily traditionally had insurance in the past, it's a hard thing to take away from them, very unpopular once you have something in hand. So it has been interesting to see that rhetoric soften, or at least, while they're trying to make it a hard line, or at least acknowledging the fact that we can't go back to the thing that we had before. There was a reason why these changes were happening, whether you like the particular set of legislation that came out or not. It has been interesting to see how they're now talking about what comes next if the ACA as it exists today is not that next set of things.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot. I was in New England about 2 weeks ago, so we were in New Hampshire and Maine, and so yeah, there's a lot of that conversation. And hey, Chris and I live in Ohio, so we're a swing state, so definitely get a lot of that. So, how about you, Amanda?
I think my big story this week that I've been intrigued with is a company called Theranos. Theranos is a medical laboratory system founded by Elizabeth Holmes, that focuses on doing samples and blood work in a much easier, minimal, more technology-driven way. They had some backlash from a Wall Street Journal article this week around some of their FDA approval and the accuracy of some of their testing. So I think as we start to explore that other part of healthcare, which is very wearable, technology-driven, medical device-driven, we're going to start to look at a lot of these companies that are going to run really fast and evolve and create technology that's going to be very life-altering for patients. But I think that there's going to be a lot of stories that come out like this, that those companies that moved really fast, they get a little bit of backlash from whether it be some of the papers or maybe some of the big drug makers that are scared by some of their fast-creating technology. So Theranos is definitely my exciting news story for the week.
Yeah, I think it's just an example of, kind of everyone having their crisis plans, in place when you need to leverage that. But I think, like, Eric Ries was, talking at the conference. You do have to do that kind of, the fast, like GE, like their FastWorks program. That's it kind of comes with the territory when you're experimenting. But at the same time, doing some of those pilot programs are the only way we're going to be able to get some of those done too. So
they always say fail fast.
Yep, exactly. Fail fast and move on to the next one. So
exactly.
Chris, how about you?
So sometimes our eyes glaze over dealing with these fundraise stories. But one that happened this week that I thought was really important was Lyra Health. They raised $35 million to scale up, like every startup does. But Lyra is in a space of mental health. And I think just listening to other people discuss this space and talk about how technology is going to impact patient behavior change, I think that this fundraise is the beginning of some pretty aggressive moves with several early stage innovators. So if you're looking at kind of what are the spaces that are going to be really interesting, go boom or bust in 2016, Lyra Health and the space of behavior health is going to be one of those spaces. So it caught my eye not because it was national news like Theranos, but this space will be national news in the months and the year to come.
All right. Well, my story and idea of the week is nothing too exciting. It was cute though. The photo was like a deer and a puppy like laying together, the puppy licking the deer's ear or something. But Stephanie Baum on MedCity News, kind of wrote about these, about interesting different pairings. You always talked about, a lot of the hospitals getting rid of McDonald's and things like that. So if you haven't read that story, I'll give my little plug for MedCity. Head over to MedCity News and. It was just a fun look at, if you could dream up some interesting different partnerships, what would those look like? So,
well, I'd love to actually the digital marketers on this case. That Stephanie's story came up because in UNC renamed its Children's Health Center the Krispy Kreme Children's Health Center because of this donation. I wrote an original story about that. Didn't think that was the smartest decision ever on the planet. But some big donors are going to come from some of the most unhealthy places. I don't know if either of the marketers on the call saw that or what they think of that issue of naming your health buildings after unhealthy things.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, they're a client, so I have no particular insight. But I will say I think there is a real challenge because healthcare as an industry has not necessarily thought about brand first, and so very often I think we have seen, and it's not necessarily quite as big a schism. To be fair, it was some sort of Krispy Kreme race that is naming itself, but not a lot better. But I think organizations have taken names and it's added to a lot of brand confusion. And it's not necessarily, from the perspective of those shepherding the brand, been the ideal answer that they've wanted. It's not the ideal piece that they really want to showcase. And particularly in academic medical centers, we have what we refer to as the Russian nesting doll brand strategy, where you have the thus and such institute at the thus and such hospital at the thus and such system, with the so-and-so chair of this, you end up with so many brand names flying around that it's difficult to recall where this medicine's actually being practiced. So it's going to be an interesting opportunity and challenge for them to figure out how that fits into their overall brand story. But I think they will figure out what to do with that, and it should be interesting to watch if nothing else.
All right, I know we're just a few minutes over time, but I want to do one other small plug for ShushMed, and maybe Ben, you can talk about this. There's this really cool Bridging Worlds piece that really talks about, kind of the future role of the healthcare strategist. And I think you mentioned that folks can get their hands on this even if they're not a member. That we always want folks to become a member, I'm sure. But
yes, and if you were at the conference, you are a member for the next year. So congratulations. This was a research report that we put out last year. It was a big effort from within ShushMed, as well as some assistance from HDR Consulting, looking both inside the industry at what the newest, greatest things are and where people see things going, as well as an awful lot of time focused out of industry to see how we can learn from other spaces. It identifies a number of trends that people in what within ShushMed refer to as the strategy disciplines, so marketing, PR, strategy, physician relations, areas like that. How this is going to affect them on a day-to-day basis and what kinds of issues they're going to have to be focused on and concerned. A lot of the things we've talked about were very present at the conference in no small part because this was the driver for a lot of the educational prioritization going in. So retailization, changes in the competitive landscape, big data as a trend, changes in the pricing models and transparency, engaging consumers in new and different ways. It talks quite a lot about that. And while I think there's been a lot of analysis around how healthcare is changing, there hasn't been a lot that takes it down to, okay, within your particular function, what are the things that are going to change for you, and how do you need to be building new competencies, new skills, maybe picking up some new technologies in order to be competitive in the future. So if you go out to the ShushMed website, that's shushmed.org, SHSMD, it's the Society for Healthcare Strategy and Market Development. And in the little banner that spins around, there's something for the Bridging Worlds report. You can download that as a non-member. So there's lots of great stuff there. If you are a ShushMed member, also relevant to today's discussion, the American Hospital Association earlier this year put out a digital and social guide primarily for executives. So it's not really advanced for those of us who spend all of our time in this space, but it's a great tool for convincing executives who may not be as up to speed on what's really going on in the social realm, giving them something with the AHA branding around it, saying it really is okay. You need to be a little bit careful, but it's okay to actually let your staff talk on social media from time to time. It's okay to give your marketing people access within the building. Some basic kinds of topics like that, and really explains the story of what's really going on from a social perspective. That one is available only to ShushMed members, but you can also get that through the website at shushmed.org.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank Ben and Amanda, and thanks, Chris, for letting me kind of take over. This might be the last time you see me, I guess. I don't know, depending on how. It's probably better that Chris is not in the same room with me potentially, so he can't kick me or anything like that. So, but thank you again to both of you and everyone who tuned in. And this gets archived, and continue to follow MedCity News, or you can find, I'm sure, all four of us on Twitter as well. So. Thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.